Welcome, everybody. We're just gonna allow more folks to filter in and then we'll get started. Excited to be here with you all for this Access to Capital event.
I think we can give it maybe like 2 minutes. I have 101. I'm on Central Time. Maybe 2 more minutes and we'll get right into this very, very fun event. We're going to make talking about access to capital fun because we have some powerhouses here to help break this thing down for us. So I'm really excited to get started. So let's give everybody about 2 minutes and then we will kick it off. While we're waiting, if you want to, the common icebreaker on Zoom, if you want to give us your name, and where you're from, and perhaps the most burning question you might have on your mind right now about access to capital, while we wait on more folks to trickle in. So that's going to be your name, where you're from. If you are a B Corp, put that in there and that burning question, the reason why you're here. Let's put that in the chat. And we have about 1 more minute and we are going to officially kick this off. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Access to Capital main event for today. I am extremely excited to have you here. I'm glad that you've carved out your afternoon to join us today. I am Taliba Bales, and I will be serving as the moderator to a rockstar panel that is here to talk to us about all things. How do I get money for my B Corp, my business? How do I become bankable? How do I break all these things down? If you're just coming in, we're doing the common Zoom icebreaker where you can give us your name, your location, and the reason why you're here, the most burning question that you have on your mind about this thing called access to capital. And as we're doing that, I want to make sure that everyone arrives and starts with the mindset of this is going to be an informal, open, honest, transparent discussion. We have put a lot of work into curating some really insightful questions that our panelists have come prepared to talk about. But again, really want to make sure that the reason why you're here is satisfied. So as you are hearing the panelists provide those answers to the questions, I want to make sure that you know you will get the opportunity to ask that burning question that you came here for. And we are also going to do breakout rooms where you will have the opportunity to chat one-on-one with some of our panelists. So I hope you are excited as we are. As we wait for more folks to put where you're from and your burning question in the chat, I have to acknowledge our co-sponsors. Obviously, this is thrown on by B Lab, and we also are collaborating with the BIPOC network, and we are putting links for each organization in the chat so you can learn more about each organization. And of course, our third collaborator is the Level program. All very intentful and intentional organizations that know how important this topic is for those of us in the space of impact. and needing the money to be able to carry out the reasons why we have gotten into this business of doing business for good. So be sure to check out the links for B Lab, for the BIPOC network if you're not aware, as well as for the Level program. So are you ready? Thank you all so much for putting your locations into the chat. I see Connecticut. I, I think I see Puerto Rico. Very awesome. All right, so we're going to go right into this greatness here, and I want to introduce the three folks that will join us as our panelist speakers. And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and make sure that we edify them completely and accurately by allowing them to introduce themselves, and particularly not just their corporate title, because as I said, this is going to be probably the most transparent and open and honest panelists that you've been on in a while. But also, just I want you to know how genuinely vested our panelists are in you. So we are going to let them introduce themselves and give us a sneak peek as to why they are here. And how they will be helping us in this conversation through their lens. And Dennis, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Laura. My name is Dennis Aguirre. I'm at the Business Development Bank of Canada. My role is regional manager for inclusive entrepreneurship. So I get to work with lots of women entrepreneurs, lots of Black entrepreneurs, and lots of Indigenous entrepreneurs. This group is, what we call underserved. Yeah, so trying to provide capital, trying to provide finance, trying to reduce the barriers to finance and trying to reduce the barriers for them to get off their business, scale their business, grow their business. So that is what I do. Did I get all the points you wanted me to
You
touch?
did. You did. You
Okay,
did.
awesome.
All right, Miss Arlene, we are ready to hear from you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Arlene Siller. My company is Ascend Nonprofit and Business Solutions, and we move money, is what I like to say, because we operate in the grant and proposal space, bid proposal writing, and so we do that for nonprofits predominantly, but also city and counties, and then some small businesses that are looking to do contracting or looking for grant writing. And prior to doing this work in my business, when I started this in 2019, I worked for a national CDFI. And CDFIs provide access to capital and business education for small businesses, predominantly minority owned, women owned. And so this space of helping businesses is something that is really important to me and passionate because I think I'm not the only one on here who would say, I applied and put in my paperwork to get my EIN, and then the rest of it, you have to figure out yourself. And capital is key to all of that. So to make your dream happen, money needs to come in from somewhere. And so if I can help other businesses find that money and find that money without loans, I'm not opposed to loans, that's a good thing too, but there's lots of different avenues. And so if I can help other business owners, that's what I'm here to do.
Very awesome. Are you guys getting even more excited? We have one more panelist to prove to you how great this discussion is going to be. Miss Auralia.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Oralia Alvarez, and I'm the Director of Business Development at Mission Driven Finance. We're headquartered in beautiful San Diego, California. And Mission Driven Finance is an asset management firm. And that's really important to be aware of this afternoon as we're having this discussion, because as an asset management firm, it really gives us the flexibility and, more importantly, the enablement to be able to run multiple funds on our platform. And I think as we're trying to really impact communities across the country, across the globe, that's really essential, right? It's about having access to different forms of capital, to different type of investors, because in the broader world of impact investing, even the term impact is very, I would say, nebulous, and everyone has a different definition. And so with us being an asset management firm, it says, okay, we have multiple funds. Well, all those multiple funds have different interests, different intentions with the type of impact that they're looking for anything from environmental sustainability, diverse management, economic mobility, healthcare, education, all across the board. So that's one. Secondly, prior to me being entrusted to be in the world of impact investing, my background is in entrepreneurship, specifically in agriculture, as well in real estate. And so one of the things I learned along the way is at the end of the day, asset allocators really have a lot of, for the lack of a better word, power. And I thought, okay, if I can get myself somewhere in asset allocation, that's really where we're going to have be able to affect change at scale. And that's really the reason I ended up in the world of impact investing, really trying to understand how do we match phenomenal visionary founders with the type of investors that are patient capital and are willing to say, I'm willing to get make a positive impact, but also get a financial return. It's just going to take a little bit longer than anticipated. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Very awesome. And I already, you kind of gave a teaser to a question that I hope we get to cover throughout this time from the perspective of an investor. But first, let's prioritize probably one of the most commonly asked questions that I know that I get in working with business in this space. And that is specifically, I want you all, Arlene or Aurelia, Dennis, please, let's dive into how can we decide what type of funding is best for us as business owners? Who wants to jump in on that? What type of funding should we navigate through, or is there a different type of funding depending on the business? Let's try to tackle that, because I know that's a bit chunk, but let's try to tackle that topic.
Well, I'm happy to get started. I mean, for me, my approach was when I started my business, I had faith in myself, but I didn't know if it was going to take off, right? So I didn't want to go after a lot of loans and other types of credit. So I have a very low overhead business. I also wanted to ensure that I would maintain 100% control of my company. And so from that perspective, I did bootstrap, a little bit in the beginning. But then grants were another opportunity for me to be able to expand and grow my business. I did start this business with a really cheap Acer computer. So you do what you have to do until your business starts to grow. And my capital needs are different now that I'm in year 6. And so now we do look at things like line of credit. We generated credit cards, around the first year so that we could establish credit for the business. So looking at different types of credit, different types of revenue sources, as your business starts to grow, as you find you're looking at your cash flow, as you look at what the other needs are for your business, and being open to all that exists out there, because what your business looks like today won't be necessarily what it looks like in year 3, year 7, year 10, 20, right? So I think just looking at it from that perspective. So for me at first, grants was the way to go, because you don't have to pay that back. You get to utilize it the way that you determine when you submit the application. And so control was, a big thing for me, and then not having debt.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Interesting for me, when I talk to entrepreneurs, it's all about, where do you want to go? Where do you, the kind of industry you're in, because all of those things will determine the sort of funds you want to chase. First of all, when I talk to entrepreneurs, the first thing I say, the best money you can get is your own money. That's the best money you can have, right? If you have your own money, and that's why I always say, most times we'll tell people like, hey, before we go, I know circumstances are different for many people. However, that is why you need to plan, because usually if you would go to the bank to ask for money, the bank also wants to see what's going to be your skin in the business. So that could be a source of fund for you, having your own money. Sometimes it could be angel money. Sometimes it's family money, friends and family. Those are some of the people that can put money into your venture. But it also, just like I said, it depends on the business. It depends on what level where you are in, right? So that might be that source of funding. And just like Aline has said, like maybe grants as well. But as you start expanding, there might be a need for debts, right? Maybe you get a business loan, to help you maybe buy equipment or maybe leasehold improvements and all this sort of things. Those things are very, very good. The other way you can another source of financing for your business could be equity. Just like you might want to sell some part of your business, you want to give some part of your business for a specific amount, which can be invested into the business to grow. But however, as you do all of this, I always say, make sure you have that right business advisor by your side. Make sure you have somebody advising you. Make sure you have somebody that understands where you are, and so that you can, at that point, get the right sort of financing that you actually need.
All right, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I would say with English being my second language, the dictionary is actually one of my very favorite books. I read, like it's not a joke, it's real. Like I really love the dictionary. So I always one of the things that I got used to hearing a lot in the world of impact investing was the phrase "capital is a tool," right? And so one day I decided, let me actually look up the definition of tool, and I love the three key takeaways. And trust me, this is relevant to answering your question. The number one, it said tool, it's a mechanism, it's an enabler, and third, it's a force. And so as a mechanism, it's designed to carry out a particular function. And this reminded me, use of funds. Second, it's an enabler. It's to make things possible, growth opportunities. Third, it's a force multiplier. It's about adding strength, energy, action, and movement. Like, who would have thought that money actually has a personality or characteristics? But I mentioned this because as founders, I think if we get comfortable with the idea of actually starting assigning characteristics to capital, we can start asking questions to capital. Capital, oftentimes I think when we talk about position, what is it called? The positions of power. Oftentimes I think founders are, and I say this as a former founder, right? I'm like, we are in a position of looking for capital, trying to say, how do I position myself to be able to access that capital? But the most important question is, what type of capital actually aligns with my mission? Like, I think that's the broader question. But then to answer the question that you mentioned, well, capital, there's tons of different options of capital, which is a good thing, right? That means that what we call the capital spectrum. Typically, it's divided between debt and equity. But the way that we look at it at Mission Driven Finance is really the way that this country's financial institution really is laid out is typically you have your smaller, like CDFI, smaller in the sense of their loan size are capped at 200K typically. And then on the other side, you have your banks. And unfortunately, we have this massive chasm in the middle, what we call the missing middle. And I think a lot of us impact investors, that's really what we're trying to serve, right? So that's really, even in the missing middle, debt is just a really tiny part of the type of capital that's out there. There's like MCAs, merchant cash advances, which are horrible. They're evil. Stay away from those. There are factoring deals, right? Factoring lines typically are good options for maybe like CPG companies, not necessarily for service-based businesses. So you have to look at what's my business, what industry am I in, and what's the specific use of capital, and then say, okay, I know there's 20 different options of capital. Each of these type of capitals, what are they designed to do, right? In the instance of factoring, it is specifically when you get like a cash advance against a specific contract, that matches. Not necessarily the cheapest capital, but sometimes it makes sense. For impact investors, obviously, we're looking specifically for impact. So if you're addressing healthcare disparities, that would be like a perfect example of I'm addressing my business need with that specific type of capital. So there's massive amounts of capital out there. It's just identifying which one aligns with me. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
And I think I want to reverse a little bit, if we can, before that question, because, from the accounting and tax side and working with business owners, we got to talk about this. And that is, kind of before we get into what type of funding may be best for my business, I think we also want to make sure that we talk about knowing how much funding we need for our business. Because
Hmm.
over the years I found, and please, Arlene, Dennis, or I'll jump in on your experience, but a lot of times we, have seen where businesses don't really have that dollar amount, or said differently, that budget for cost of running my business. How much is it going to cost me to run my business? And when you start there, then you have a better navigation, I believe, in what type of funding may be best for you. And here's where I'm going with that. If we take it from a startup, you are in maybe you're at ideation or maybe up to year one, a lot of business owners struggle with, well, I have no idea how much it's going to cost me to run my business. So how do we derive that? And if this is applicable to you and you're listening, please put that in the chat, because from an accounting perspective, I would say, here's what you know. You know all the things you've spent money on, right? So usually in that startup phase, you're like, okay, I got all these receipts, or I know that I've spent money on these goods or on these software tools to help me provide my services, but I have no idea what my budget should be. Start with your costs, because if you know, and this is just simplifying everything, but if you know that it costs you $100 to produce said good or said service, then you know you need to charge more, right, than the $100. So I guess where I want to make sure that we talk about, y'all, is before we know what type of funding that we desire in our business or that we're going to go after, I want you
Hmm.
all to know how much to ask for. So Arlene, when you're working with business owners, particularly in determining grants and your CDFI role, what can you add to that discussion?
I think it's definitely understanding your numbers and knowing what your business needs now, but then also being able to forecast going forward. And in a grant application, they ask you what the funds are going to be used for. And when we use generic statements like, I'm going to use this for paying employees, or I'm going to use it to buy this equipment, that really isn't enough to give that funder something to go off of. And so the details and you knowing why you need that and what the return on the investment is going to be, even on a piece of equipment. Like now with my current equipment, I produce, 50 widgets a week. With this new equipment, I will be up to 200. And this is what it means for my business in terms of revenue, in terms of being able to hire part-time, full-time, bring on additional consultants, whatever that might look like for you. But understanding not only what your business needs now, but also projecting into the future, because that's a critical component. In the contract space, that's particularly important if you're going after government types of contracts, right? Because you do get asked a question, not on every application. And by the way, every single application that I'm speaking of from a grant perspective or bid proposal, everyone is different, right? So just because you did one, you didn't do them all. But on the contract side, sometimes we are asked to produce documentation as far as a line of credit, because if it's a reimbursement contract, you have to be able to cover your people, cover your equipment, cover, all your other costs for whatever period of time before that gets reimbursed. And so if it's government grants, if it's a government contract, understand that there's a compliance component to it. So that's going to cost you as well. And so being able to predict what that looks like and budget for those things, and then adequately convey that. So sometimes you're going to be asked for, either a line of credit, or you might have to show your balance sheet to show that you have enough money right now. And that's part of the application that you would submit. So this concept of, knowing what you need and having it and being able to then, if you do need to go out and look for additional funds, you know what you need it for. And that's another, really important thing. If you had to go to a bank to get that line of credit, explaining that your strategy for your business is to go after government contracts and being able to show them, these are the last 5 that came out that I couldn't apply for because I didn't have this. And this is what the money that my business left on the table because I wasn't in that position. So that articulation of your financial needs is really important, whether, it's venture capital fund, banking, or anything else, just being able to explain that.
We have a really good question that I want to pose to you guys. It's along the same lines, and this is beyond grants. Is there any money that if things don't go well, wouldn't put you in debt or wouldn't harm your personal credit score? And I like this question because I think it'll allow you all to add a lot more back to that. So Dennis, you want to grab that? I'll read it again for everyone. Beyond grants, is there any money that if things basically did not go well, that would not put the business owner in debt or harm the business owner's personal credit score?
Okay, that's a very, very interesting one.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I answer it right. All right. So to be very honest, I'm not sure if it exists. Right. It doesn't exist, right? So
Yeah.
usually when you get funds from the bank, there's either a personal guarantee, there's something that covers it. If it's not collateralized, there's a personal guarantee. So somehow in one way or the other, it affects you. One thing I always want to say when I have conversations with business owners, the business is a risk. It is a risk. It could be
Mhm.
successful, it could be unsuccessful. However, just like my mom always told me, she said, "Hey, Dennis, if you fail to plan, your plans will fail."
Mhm.
And she's always told me to always think about planning, think about planning. So even when I meet business owners and they come for funding, I always tell them, what are your scenarios? For example, I would find people maybe setting up a coffee shop and everywhere else. It's going to cost me $200,000. I was like, it's not about $200,000. It's about $250,000 because
Mhm.
before you get all the customers coming to get a cup of coffee and all that, there is a time between when you're going to break even. So how are you going to pay for that? So you need to be able to accommodate that. One time I financed a shop. It was a retail shop, and during the point of construction, the contractor ran away. He got bankrupt.
Mhm.
However, the business had already taken the loan, and we were, so at that point, so the business was supposed to open in January. It didn't open till December. So
Mhm.
12 months, that business owner had to be covering the cost, even though the business was not yet open.
Wow.
Right. So if that person did not make that plan, like she would have also gone belly up. Right.
Wow.
So I think it's always, us already understanding that, and just coming back to that question, it doesn't exist. If I would say the only place it exists is you making the plan and
Mhm.
knowing the risk associated. Even as I provide loans to people every day, I tell them, read the lines, read through, like, are they going to come with, are they like, I know in Canada, the law does not allow banks to come for your house and all those sort of things. So there's certain rules
Oh, wow.
associated.
That's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So the law does
Mhm.
not allow that. So
Mhm.
be sure of your signing. Be sure of what it involves. So that's going to be my insight for that question.
No, I think that's a very honest answer because I was thinking the same thing, Araya. I know as an asset managing perhaps equity, is a part that should come up because I've seen a couple of questions in the chat about in exchange for capital, giving ownership in your business. And I think even in that instance, especially in that instance, right, Araya, it may not be your personal credit that would be take a blow, but then that's where it would be any type of litigation or whatever you, as Dennis has said, signed on that dotted line for in exchange for that capital. That equity is still going to have you on the line. So whether or not it's actual cash to be turned back over to the investor after a certain amount of time or some other asset, whether it's personal credit score or not, planning is going to, really and it's risk regardless, but planning is really going to try to mitigate through that. Araya, as an asset manager, what can you add to that?
Yeah, so I would say just for clarification purposes, so as an for impact investing at Mission Driven Finance, all of our funds are strictly debt capital, right? So
Okay.
we're not taking ownership of any company,
Okay.
more due to philosophical reasons.
Okay.
So all of our funds are debt, but I would say I love the fact that we're honing in on the importance of planning. This is actually really key and critical, and it's typically what makes or breaks a lot of the businesses that we're working with. So, for example, our loan size could be as small as 100K up to 1.5 million. 1.5 million is not a small loan check, right? And so the things that we're looking for when we're looking at a business is obviously the key financials, but more importantly, we're looking at financial projections. And it's exactly what Arlene was mentioning. Like, you have to be able to assign a specific job or business activity to the amount of funding that you're requesting for, right? It has to be that specific. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes we work with a lot of businesses that might be at an inflection point. In the past, they might have not necessarily been profitable. However, they are at a point where they might be onboarding their first corporate contract or government contract. And it's a massive, like at this point, they have proven financial capacity. However, they might not necessarily have the cash flow to be able to float costs for the next 60 to 90 days, because typically that's how long it takes for them to get reimbursed for the work. And so this is where financial projections really are key. So again, this business might have not been profitable in the past, but we're not going to hold that against them as an impact lender. We're going to say, moving forward, what looks different? And those projections, more importantly, have to be substantiated. So that's where you attach your revenue sources. So future planning, future projections, unfortunately, does require a little, and I say unfortunately because there's a little bit of magic that includes there. And magic in the sense of, depending on the industry that you're in or operating in, you also have to take into account what are like appropriate haircuts that I might consider. Like, if everything were to hit the fan, if my plan doesn't go as planned, am I already planning for a 5 or 10% decrease of top line of customer revenues? We want to see that level of planning, because that's number one, it's saying, hey, you actually have financial management in place. But then secondly, you're also thinking of different options or different ways to pivot if things were not to go as planned. So I think that's really important financial projections is really what makes or breaks a lot of our small businesses at the end of the day.
And it's in the weeds. It's certainly nuts and bolts, but it really does. And of course, y'all know I'm biased being an accountant, but seeing the nuts and bolts of your numbers, no matter whether you like them or not, right? But seeing them truly does empower you to make some key operational decisions, let alone be able to speak to your capability to an investor. There's another good question that I want us to tackle. Because I think this is
Before we do, can I just
Sure. Go ahead,
So
Arlene.
I thought of three other ones.
Okay.
Grants. So one, I did a pitch competition, and that was a $25,000 investment in my business. Crowdfunding would be the other, and then there are government, and this tends to happen locally, more like on the city or county level. Programs that are for small business initiatives. So, for example, right now, I'm in San Antonio, is where I'm headquartered. And the city makes a lot of investments into small businesses. And so we did an application, and they are providing training to my incumbent workers up to $5,000, and for my new employees up to $10,000. And so I don't get those funds directly up front. I have to do the training first, and I get reimbursed for that. So those would be some other things that aren't tied to credit or debt or anything else like that that I could think of that I've personally experienced.
Absolutely. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And there are even tax credits that are kind of in line with what Arlene is saying, where some cities and counties will incentivize, they call it workforce development. If you're hiring and creating jobs within that area or state or city, there could be incentives from payroll tax perspective for you as well. That's really good. Thank you so much, Arlene, for adding on to that. There's a question here that I think is applicable, especially in this family and community when it comes to B Corps and benefit corporations. So this is from Rosalind. One thing that I've struggled with, especially for grants, is that my business doesn't have widgets. It is a consulting practice. So my expenses are only people. I find most grant applications want to fund things, i.e., widgets, and not people. Are there any payroll specific grants? We kind of talked about that, ironically, and I hadn't read all the way down to the bottom. But I like Rosalind's question for a number of different reasons, obviously for how she asked it. But I think, that was something that that led me to actually convert to a benefit corporation and subsequently a B Corp, because you're getting in the business of making your service and measuring impact of your service in the community. But Arlene, do you want to tackle that a little bit?
Sure. So my business is a service-based business, and I have been able to secure grant funds through a service-based business. I don't have a widget, and I do sell online courses, and that came later for me, and was just another line of revenue. And I actually use the 0% interest loans to help me develop that side of the business. But to answer the question about, are there payroll specific grants? They're not going to be under those terms of payroll specific grants. They will say things like working capital and those types of things. Again, you have to be very specific about who you're hiring, what you are hiring them for, and how is it going to transform the business. And so that's the part that you really need to work on the language and being able to do that in the number of characters that they allow you, and really get that point across very quickly. If you can also speak to who you're hiring, for instance, if you're hiring single mothers or people of a certain education background or demographic or things like that. So those types of things help as well.
Yeah. And just really those workforce development keywords, again, in whether it be local, county, or city. I'm starting to see a lot of opportunities in that area if you frame it under workforce development as well. All right.
I would also say you don't always have to be the person, the organization putting in the grant. So also partnering, I do a lot of work with nonprofits. So if your business provides some service that would be a benefit to them or the recipients of their services, and you're a sub on their grant, that is another way for you to be able to get grant funds indirectly. And it's going to be project-based for whatever you're doing on that particular grant.
Very good. So we've kind of talked about this, but I want to specifically call it out. And so here's another question that we can pivot towards. When you're sitting down with business owners, what do you typically prioritize when you're reviewing proposals or asks for money? Is there anything that we may not have touched on? Like, what do you prioritize?
Well, this should be the easiest question because this is exactly what I get paid for. But it's actually a really tough one because I have a really hard time saying no, right? Okay. So the
Did y'all hear? Wait, hold on. She said, "What? They have a hard time saying no." I couldn't let you slide on that. So everybody, right now.
Yes. Oh my goodness!
No,
not just me, kind of like the whole team, right? So the three things at Mission Driven that we look at, and again, just for context, Mission Driven in the world of the lending space, it's considered to be like really creative and flexible, specifically because we don't ask for personal guarantees, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it makes the getting to a yes any easier. It's just saying, hey, we don't believe in asking for like personal collateral. We don't believe in asking for a credit score for you to even have access to be considered for funding. If anything, it just says we're going to double down on the economics of the business, right? So not anything easier. We're just removing mechanisms. And so with that having been said, at Mission Driven Finance, the three things that we look at in evaluating a funding request, number one, it has to have impact. Again, anything from environmental sustainability, access to healthcare, education, workforce, economic mobility. The moment we vet for that impact, then we open that discussion of, okay, let's look at what is the financial health of the business. And that's really where we get to dive into the financial statements. As an impact investor, that we want to make sure that taking on a loan is actually a strategic move and it's not going to be burdensome to make that monthly payment, because like other non-impact folks, oh my gosh, like the MCAs, they don't care if you have good financial health. They say, just give me that payment short term. They put you in this vicious cycle. And so we do have that responsibility. So even if we say not now, it's not because we don't believe in the impact. It just says we're going to put you in a stronger position. We're going to refer you to specific technical assistance support, and then we'll reconvene later on. So number one, we'll look at impact. Number two, we'll look at financial health. And then number three, we're going to look at, we want to make sure that you are able to be able to actually pay back the loan, right? Because again, more importantly, with us getting repaid, what's really important here is that capital has the potential to recirculate back into the community. So that it's this idea of capital that keeps giving and giving, not one time, but multiple times. But the things that we're looking at the end of the day, the secret to getting approved is you need to have.
You said that you don't say no.
No, the secret is to have one is the magic number. Your debt service coverage ratio has to be minimum a 1, right? And this is really straightforward. It's just your net income, which is found on the net income over your existing total debt service. That's really what we're looking for. And that says this business is in a good position, right? That's really what it is. I think that's the most important part.
Very good. Very good. Dennis?
Yeah, I think it's same thing for us as well. Apart from the impact, but it's the business sustainable, right? There has to be some it has to be sustainable. It has to be able to pay the debts, but also has future potential. I'll give you give you an example. So during COVID, for example, we found that many businesses, just got out of COVID. But for me, and because of people were not going to work and all of these sort of things, it was beautiful. Everybody was doing that. But one of the things we did, we were like, hey, if COVID was, goes away and all those sort of things, is this business still going to be sustainable? Right. So we always want to future ask that sort of question. What are you thinking about it? Is this going to work or not work? And for some businesses, we said no. And after COVID, guess what? All those businesses just went from 100 and went to 0. It's just understanding, having that big picture. Is it sustainable? Is it going to change? So even sometimes, looking at into this world, sometimes what I look is that how are you even applying technology? Are you applying technology to, example, you're going to be getting your invoices? Are you going to be doing paper invoices, or do you want to go into an app that can basically help you more real time, more efficient? So for me, apart from just looking at the whole sustainability, but it's looking at the whole thing. How are you looking at this business? Are you set is the business going to be resilient? Are you going to be changing with time? Because sometimes too, that might be a problem. I'm fixed to this fixed mindset of stuff. How are you looking? What about if there's that change? So I think those are some of the things that we look at. And sometimes, again, one last thing I'm going to add, when I have this conversation, we're making our projection based on 5%, 6%, right? I was like, okay, yeah, that's good. However, what about, let's look at multiple scenarios, right? And this was, I think I got this from my background as a geologist, where we do like 3 scenarios. So I've always brought that into finance as well, to say, hey, tell me your scenario. What about if your low case scenario didn't work and you move from 5% to 10%? How are you going to do that? How are you going to deal? So for me, those are the things that I look at when I have a conversation with a business owner, just to make sure they have thought about all of these things that can happen and things that may not happen.
Very good. And Arlene, I saw you come off mute. I want to summarize this though, because we're really dropping some gems. And so that was when asked, what do they prioritize? We heard your debt service ratio. And so I want to make sure, because I saw that question come in. Basically, what they're saying is, can you pay them back? Right. So when you are sharing your financials, whether that be you've connected your bank account to whatever platform they're using, and they're analyzing your cash flow, whether you've provided a profit and loss statement, whether you provided a tax return, they're looking at, once that gross revenue comes in, all bills are paid, right? Can you pay this loan back? So I just wanted to make sure that we're breaking it down to the most basic level. And so without getting on my podium and grabbing the mic, if that number is negative, then you are telling them you cannot pay them back. Okay. And so there's a whole nother probably panel discussion that we could have on negative financials, negative tax returns, so forth and so on. But I wanted to make sure that you all, when we're saying debt service ratio and using those types of formal things, in essence, what we're saying is your bottom line. After your bottom line is there and you're walking in and you're talking to Aurelia, or you're talking to Arlene, help me fix my life, or Dennis, is it that you're already coming in and that number is negative? And what does that mean? And what can you do to improve that? We also heard Dennis saying sustainability. So in the projections that Arlene talked about, where you're forecasting out, usually it's up to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. Is it logical? Is it showing that you've put that thought process in to say that we're going to be around because I'm doing this, and here is what the numbers say? Arlene, you wanted to say something? I saw you come off of mute before we go to the next question.
I was just going to say, in terms of answering the questions about like what we look for when we're, maybe writing an application for a business is, I talked about it already in terms of like really knowing what you need the money for and being able to clearly articulate that. But then I think just also knowing your numbers, because oftentimes the question will be asked in a strange way. Like it'll ask you to give, your revenue for the last 3 years, your expenses for the last 3 years, and then it might ask you, tell us why there's a change, either positive or negative. And so sometimes I've even seen questions about like, what is your relationship with money? And so those are important things. That's one of the things that they're looking at is how do you manage it? How do you feel about it? What you have done in your personal life is very indicative of what you will do with your business as well. And so I think that's another thing that sometimes business owners are like, well, why are they asking for my personal taxes when I'm talking about the business? And it's because you, as the business owner, how you handled your personal, finances, unless you've done something different, completely different, really is going to be pretty much how you're going to handle things for your business. And so they're taking a look at those things. So sometimes, on applications too, you will be asked about your feelings around money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so Arlene is saying, and that is a subliminal / roundabout way to diagnose your psychology on that business. Very, very helpful.
And get therapy if you need to.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's a perfect segue because we've kind of touched on the peripheries of this, and I see LaShandra's statement as well as that's actually a question that I had to get the panelists to share on, and so in essence, we need to break down how to quantify impact, right? So Aurelia said, their impact investing. We've talked about sustainability. Arlene's really working with you on framing that impact and that storytelling and those capabilities. But how can you quantify impact? And LaShandra, please let me know if that's not what you were asking. But I feel as though this is the perfect event to do that, because in essence, if we're in the space of saying, because of my service or because of the goods that I do, I am having this impact in this community. And I want to use myself as an example. So I'm all services. I'm taxes and accounting, but I am a B Corp. And so the secret to how we got into that process, and I've seen a couple of folks ask about that certification process. So I think we're really giving you a good teaser here on the answer to that. I actually had to quantify what in the heck, like, how are you having an impact doing taxes and accounting? Well, how do you do that? You have to survey your clients. How did I quantify that? I said, well, if I work with X amount of business owners and they are qualifying for X amount of loans, this is the impact I'm having because they then got $8 million. So where am I going with that? And I think Arlene, that's really where she helps with the grant application. So I'm really excited to hear what she says about that. But really being able to quantify the impact that you're doing is going to be key. And the process of becoming a B Corp and that certification calls for it. Like you just can't say, I'm working with minority business owners to ensure that they have access to quality taxes and accounting. B Lab's like, yeah, really? And so how many clients do you have? How many tax returns did that equate to? And again, digging in the numbers. So even as a service provider, you can absolutely quantify your impact by surveying and seeing the outcomes in your clients. And I hope I'm making sense, Lysandra. Arlene, please jump in. I see you came off mute. Aurelia, Dennis.
Yeah, so I mean, I think personally for my business, I mean, when you're thinking about things from the workforce side, the things that they're going to ask are, number of jobs that you've created, full-time, part-time, also for 1099ers, what your revenue has been. I am a community impact organization. We do a lot for nonprofits. We do a lot for city and county entities, education institutions. So we keep track of what all of our clients do, and that is number of grants that are awarded, number of people that they serve. I mean, I can literally say because of the service that we provide, we touch millions of lives and have raised $188 million that went to, 70 organizations. And from that, the community impact is 15-fold. Right.
And that's the key.
So keeping track of that in some way of what the work that you're doing for clients, but what does that result in for your clients as well?
Right.
So we can also report back on the number of jobs that they have created or keep and retain as a result of the work that we do. The number of people that they serve, and then those dollar amounts. And if you can extrapolate that to what it means in a particular community, we do that as well.
Araya, okay.
Yes. You nailed it, Arlene. Thank you so much. So I would say, again, even in the world of impact, I feel like a lot of folks are having this conversation. What is impact? But that's a good thing, right? Because I feel that just the way that global shifts are happening, these type of conversations ought to be happening in real time. But to answer the question, I would say there's a bucket of impact, and then there's a other bucket of deep impact. From an investor experience, what we've seen to be true has been typically the funds that are focused more like on deep impact. Those are the ones that really have more questions on like the very refined, refined numbers, like Arlene mentioned, the number of jobs being created, how many of those jobs are paid premium wages. We've seen quite like recently we onboarded a healthcare related fund to our platform. And it's been a really fascinating experience, even for us as an impact investing firm, because they have questions on that intake as far as what are you doing specifically to actually access communities that are disproportionately affected by healthcare. But they want specifics, like is it community driven in the sense of you're working with other nonprofits? Are you like actually knocking on doors with folks? That's specific, right? Then you have your other bucket of impact investors that are more like at the macro level, just help me to understand your business. And this is still fresh in my mind because I went to a presentation last week, but I love one of the nonprofits that was presenting. Her nonprofit focuses on addressing maternal health care. And during that presentation, even though they don't necessarily have like very deep metrics, she was addressing the fact that Black women specifically are 3 times more likely to not receive proper maternal healthcare. So the fact that you have that, I think starting with the macro stats is always a good start. And then how is your specific business actually making a dent? Even if it's not like super specific, just make sure that it says this is the activity that's attempting to address this challenge or this gap. So it's 2 ways. you have your impact, and then you have your deep impact. So it really, but this is where Arlene, who's an expert on impact, really helps you to be able to address those questions, because it really depends on the investors how much of a deep dive they want on that on the impact side.
And I see Alicia's off camera, so I'm probably throwing her under the bus. But I do want to give a plug to the Level program. I see a couple of folks are actually in the Level program or just recently graduated, because Alicia and that Level program does help you kind of formulate that thing. Like in the sense of, I am in this space of doing business for good. What the heck does that mean? How do I coin that? How do I keep track of that? Oh, and so if you are the link up there again, I don't know where, Alicia, we'll put that link in there. But if you are needing assistance in helping frame this, and especially under the context of becoming at the entity shape a public benefit corporation, ultimately to certification, then this is exactly what the Level program helps you with. And as I said, there's a couple of folks that I know are in the Level program or just graduated. Please feel free to plug yourself in the chat so that others can know just how valuable that experience is, and that is hosted under B Lab. And I think it does a really good job at helping you do that. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes. Dennis?
Oh no, it's interesting trying to, when you want to quantify the impact of corporations for good. It's just enormous. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like in Canada, BDC was the first bank in Canada to get like the B Corp, status. And basically,
Mm-hmm.
what our role is doing is, trying to support entrepreneurs so that we can all have a better Canada, and one that is inclusive and sustainable. And in that way, even in and investments in the underrepresented, underserved populations, even in like with BDC Capital as well, like investing in like in companies that are doing all they can so that to reduce food waste,
Mm-hmm.
and like how that food goes back to community. So what I'm just trying to say in essence is that it could be so big and it could be so small. It's interesting how like that funnel takes everyone. And sometimes people are like, well, my business is so small. Like I don't think, no, that's not the point. It could be so small, but it could be as well as so big. And all
Absolutely.
of us are we're just all working together, and just to make a beautiful life for everybody in our community. So I just wanted to add to that part there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think
Mm,
that's what's so magical
mm,
about B Lab and about,
mm,
the B Corp community, is that, we're all in it for the mission, and
mm,
together, individually and certainly together, being able to measure that impact is truly a motivating thing. So y'all, I've been kind of pulling the questions from the chat. I always say when we're doing these types of access to capital events that you are here for a reason, and I want to make sure that you get your question and your reason for being here answered. But we've kind of already cheated and shared a few tools. So while you're not being shy, hopefully, about your question, I want us to transition into some actual tools that you can use. Make sure we were putting these links in the chat again. And then we're going to give you the opportunity to actually, if you're shy and don't want to put it in the chat, perhaps get a one-on-one opportunity with either of our three panelists here in breakout rooms. So Becca has already put some tools in the chat. And while she's doing that, I want to make sure that, again, the time that you have invested in being here is absolutely satisfied. So let me edify these links here, because we've said CDFI. And when I saw Becca put it up there, I was like, you know what? I don't even think we said, like, what is a CDFI? What does that even stand for, right? So I know Arlene used to work for a CDFI. but a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. And that second link that is underneath where Becca's just put it there directly goes to, it's an African American Association of CDFIs, and they are in the business of lending. They're minority owned and lending to minority owned businesses, and that's that second link. The third link, unselfishly, is my link. That is a platform that I am in the process of rolling out, and it's called Bankably. And Bankably is here to help you get your taxes and accounting life in order, to help that fix my life area. And I also have financial education opportunities there, as well as matching you with the lender. So we already know Aurelia has said there is no. So I got to make sure that mission-driven financing will be on Bankably. But seriously, though, we want to make sure that that we're not just talking about these things, that you are going to be walking away from this discussion with some tools and some checklists to actually put some feet to the ground here. Arlene, is there, you guys, anything you want to add before we try to give folks time for the breakout sessions?
I will mention one thing just really quickly. I think this is really important. You know how we're speaking about the impact and how to measure it or quantify it? I really love what one of a really good CDFIs, actually, speaking of CDFI, Specific Community Ventures is a CDFI in the Bay Area. And they have this really neat offering where for every X number of jobs that you create, you actually get a reduction in your interest rate. I think it's like 0.25. That's a big savings, right? Especially for a 5-year term loan. So I think also that's important as you're working with any type of capital providers, if they can somehow incorporate or incentivize you to even doing more good than you're already doing, and in return you also get a financial benefit. I think that's really neat. So just something to keep in the back of mind. So CDFIs, love PCV, phenomenal partners.
Absolutely. Anything else we want to add? I think we're going to go to the breakout rooms a little bit earlier because I see some people have to hop, and I really want to make sure that you all get that time. Dennis, Arlene, anything you want to add? And Becca, are we ready to do the breakout rooms perhaps?
Yeah, I've crafted the breakout rooms. They will be opt-in. So there'll be one grant writing and application strategy with Arlene, one impact investor and funders with Aurelia, and one venture capital and alternative funding with Dennis.
Awesome.
So once we finish statements, I'm happy to open.
Okay. I think they're ready, y'all.